We're on section number 114, the raising of Lazarus, page 197. And let's just read a few verses to get us going here. John chapter 11, verses 1 and following. Now a certain man was sick named Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary which anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore his sister sent unto him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. So this brings us, let's start in with question number 649. The question is, what was Mary known for? And we're going to base that off of John chapter 11, verses 2 and also verses 28 to 29. Okay, which says, It was that Mary which anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. And then verse 28, And when she had so said, she went her way and called Mary her sister secretly, saying, The Master is come and calleth for thee. As soon as she heard that, she arose quickly and came unto him. So the question is, what was Mary known for? It is C. She anointed his feet and wiped them with her hair. So it's identifying which Mary this is. If you look at A, what was she known for? Was she slow to act and respond to him? Well, Mary might have been plagued with grief. And she wasn't there immediately when he first came in, but when she found out that Jesus had called for her, she quickly responded, and she came to him. So it's not that she was slow to react or respond. You know, in the middle of whatever we're going through, it is inspiring to know that Jesus is personally interested in us. And when we get the call to action, we need to be so trained in responding to Christ that we say, yes, sir. And that time is going to come sooner or later when you go through a time of grief or sorrow. I always wonder if what it's going to be like when somebody has a loved one who has passed away, and some have already. And the question is, at what point do you get over it? Well, that's not the question, okay? You either go through it and it lasts, it doesn't go away, or it diminishes or whatever. The question is, what will we do with Christ at that time? And I would like to think that if something tragic were to happen in my family, that if somebody came to me and said, what must I do to be saved, that I would drop all of my concerns and I would pick up and say, here's what you need to do to be saved. I'd like to think that I'll do that. Well, Mary, when she did get the call from him, she did respond to him. When you look at C, she anointed his feet and wiped them with her hair. Well, Mary's devotion was marked by her anointing his feet and wiping them with her hair. This was her reputation. That devotion was so strong that John reminded the reader of this. He's like, okay, let's remember something. Mary, who I'm about to write about, is maybe a little bit grief-stricken, and maybe she's having a reaction, but let's remember that she's known for her great devotion to Christ. And so when we look at B, okay, Martha is the one who's known for serving diligently, okay? B says she worked hard to serve him. Well, no, that was Martha's reputation. Mary had a deep devotion for Christ that he had praised at the time. Her devotion to him was something that kept drawing her to him, even though she had strong questions to bring to him. She has some strong questions that she's going to bring up. Okay, question 650. We're on question number 650 on page 198. The question is, how did Jesus feel about Lazarus? And this is based on John 11:5. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Okay, so that's pretty clear. We got the answer is A, he loved him. Yeah. When you look at A and B together, B says he didn't really care to hang out with him. Well, Jesus treated all people equally. It was not based on how much fun somebody was, whether he would hang out with them or not. He loved all people equally, and he would hang out with the chiefest of sinners, right? When you look at C, he thought he was peculiar. Well, quite frankly, Jesus probably thought everybody was peculiar. Okay. You know how we referred to this before, but there's an actual joke about an old Amish guy who was asked about people. He says, everyone is strange except for me and thee, and sometimes I wonder about thee. Okay. And so we look at everybody. Everybody's got their peculiarities. The only one who doesn't have any peculiarities is Jesus, okay, because he's God. And so really everybody else was peculiar to him. Okay, we who are also peculiar and loved by Jesus ought to always be careful to not be respecter of persons. Okay, we should accept all people as those whom Jesus loves. I think I'm going to take advantage of this moment to point out in this idea of loving everybody equally, the issue of I was going to say racial differences. I want to say racial, cultural, whatever differences there are. Okay, every other group is a little bit peculiar, and that's not something that we should ignore. Now, today there is an effort to bring about division because of those peculiarities. And to be able to have people in this day when nobody's supposed to be taking offense, we're not allowed to offend anybody, not allowed to trigger anybody, and we treat everybody as a snowflake and so sensitive that they can't take anything. I say don't hold back on normal language, not disrespectful language, but normal language. Don't hold back on it. Speak frankly, speak straightforwardly. But in the effort for today, where everybody says, oh, you got to be careful not to offend everybody, out of that arises the issue of creating safe spaces. This is especially a problem when speakers that might be more conservative, they arrive on campuses where they're invited to speak. And I was just reading about one who was dealing with pro-life issues. And the group on campus ended up just defaming her and speaking out against her, never not knowing anything that she stood for. And I was reading how that when she did get to speak to people, they found out that they had a lot more in common with her than they thought. She had taken that particular college. Her group had taken that particular college to task because of not providing for women who were expecting and shoving them off to the side. And she, as a pro-life person who was interested in the life of the unborn, had pushed and had gotten the school to respect women in that position, young ladies in that position, and not to cast them aside, and to protect them. And so the campus people, the students there, they started realizing, wait a second, there's more that can be recognized. Well, in the interest of safe spaces and not being triggered because we're so delicate that we can't handle issues and we can't handle strong issues, in that interest, what they seek to then do is separate groups instead. And so they use peculiarities now to drive people apart and to divide them. If anything, we use our peculiarities to be able to enjoy and have a richer life. Notice I didn't say to unite us. Okay, we use the peculiarities are there to in order to enjoy greater things. You have different. This comes out typically in a time when you consider different cuisine. Okay, and I always everybody's heard the story. I think Maya hasn't heard this story, so I'll share the story. My daughter Bonnie, when she'd gone out west to Indiana, the church she went to was extremely let's say it was extremely pale. Okay, it was extremely white. Now, she had grown up in this area where there's such a mixture of cultures, and she would hang out with the Villalon's kids, and at one point she had dyed her hair black. And Brother Tone had one word when he saw her, and it was beautiful. He says, "Welcome." So Bonnie gets out to Indiana, and she goes to a church luncheon at the time, and they had a Filipino family. I don't know if it was a Filipino family or just a Filipino wife. For all I know, it was just she'd married an Anglo, and so there the woman had prepared panzite. Nobody was taking the panzite. Do you know what panzite is? See, you're in for a treat. You have to make vegetable panzite because Maya's vegan and eats a vegan diet. But so we'll have to do this at some point, okay? We got to get planned for a nice vegetable panzite, and then you got to stay for lunch on that day. And so it's a very thin rice noodle, and whether they make a thicker one, they make a thin one. I like the thin ones, and so it looked like some kind of strange sauerkraut to these people out in Indiana. And so Bonnie comes up, and nobody was touching it. Nobody's having anything. Bonnie comes up to me. "Oh, panzite." The woman looks at her. "You know panzite?" "Oh, yeah, I grew up on this stuff." Okay, you see what happens is it makes life richer. And that's just with cuisine alone. And you have different dishes. I always say that I like my Polish wife, but I'm glad she's also half Italian, because I like Italian cooking a lot. Put red sauce on it. I like it, right? Cereal. No, not cereal. But you see, our peculiarities are the spice of life. Now, what is it that unites us? There's just one phrase that could be used to say there's something that absolutely does unite us. See if you can read my mind. Anybody want to guess what that one phrase is?
The blood of Christ.
That was the phrase. That was it. You got okay, we're going to let you do tricks for the kids. You can read my mind back there. Yeah, the blood, that's what unites us. The blood of Christ. What makes life interesting and fun is our peculiarities. But here's what happens, and this is at the heart of prejudice and racism. It is not only that, I call it xenophobia, the fear of something that's different. When something that's not like you, it requires that you have to think a little bit in order to understand somebody, and we don't like to think a lot of times. We like to kick back and chill and relax. And so what happens is we got to do a little bit of work. That makes it worthwhile. That makes it fun. That makes it interesting. Brother Joe.
Yeah, I just wanted to get back to the point you were making earlier, like when conservative speakers try to get on to college campuses at someone's invitation, and they're usually chased off.
Yeah.
And
with violence.
Well, I was just going to say in a violent manner.
All those tolerant people.
Right. So the saddest irony is that these tolerant people are using fascist tactics and hate speech to chase off the people who they accuse of being intolerant, fascist, and using hate speech. So
exactly.
they don't see it from their own side.
Like all they need is a brown shirt, and they'll
yes.
be fitting in with history.
And they use and the one thing that you generally don't get from the conservative side is the violence. You might get the protest, which is actually fine. I don't mind if people peacefully protest. If you have a problem with something, that's fine. The Constitution allows for that. You're allowed to protest peacefully. The key word, peacefully. In spite of some of our politicians not understanding that the word peacefully is in the Constitution, and that you can protest, but that way, and they take it upon themselves to be these self-righteous and aggrandizers, and they're just out there, and they're just the most hypocritical people you could possibly see, because they're accusing one side of being, all they're going to do is speak.
Yeah.
They're the ones participating in all the actions that they're calling out the other side for.
Yeah.
And it makes absolutely no sense.
It has been pointed out that the answer to offensive speech is not to cancel speech. The solution to offensive speech is more speech.
Right.
More speech. I don't mind that there's people out there that are saying stupid stuff about Christians. I mean, I don't enjoy it, okay, as long as I get to say stuff too.
Right.
I don't want to say stupid stuff. They're saying stupid stuff. But if I get to talk and I get to share Christ, that's what I want to be able to do. So you've got to end up doing this. And you go to places like India, where the Hindus want to try to kill the Christians, and the Muslims want to try to kill the Christians, and the Muslims want to try to kill the Hindus, and the Hindus want to kill the Muslims. The only one who doesn't want to kill anybody is the Christians. And what happens is we don't want to, we might not like that there are other cults that are out there. I don't enjoy their teachings. I think they're wrong. We're going to condemn those teachings. I would be the first one to stand up and say, no, don't kick them out of the marketplace. Okay, just give me a place in the market as well. If my ideas, if the ideas of Christ, if the teachings of Christ are superior and people want to accept it, then that's their choice to make. People are free to choose stupid stuff if they want to. But as long as we have the equal chance. Let me get Nancy and then Joe and then Wilma.
The rest of the story is the best, because when everybody saw Bonnie eating the pansy,
Oh, yes.
it gave them courage to try it, and they all loved it and asked for it ever since. And so it
Yes.
kind of goes to the point.
Yeah.
If you just pause, think, understand, try to dialogue, try to have something in common, it usually works out pretty well, because it brings an understanding and appreciation for others who aren't exactly like you.
Yeah.
And what is the point of anything if we're all clones?
Yeah, and I will tell you, I have had discussions with people who are of theological persuasions that are different enough from me. But I've had never a trouble with talking to them straightforwardly and saying, "Oh, this is what you believe. This is what I believe." You compare notes, and people don't run away screaming, "Oh, my ears, my ears!" Brother Joe and then Wilma.
Yeah, I was just going to say that a lot of this is the byproduct of putting feelings over facts.
Yes.
And, people don't want to hear the facts. They're just going to drown you out with, great is Diana of Ephesus.
Yeah, there you go.
This is not new, obviously, this tactic, but
Yes.
it's still, it's effective in the sense that it will take away discussion, because a lot of times they don't have an argument. They just have some talking points, and then once you get past that, if you have anything to say about that, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. They just want to, there's a card to play or there's a violent act to perform.
Yeah. Miss Wilma, yes. Joe? The microphone.
The other thing is, if they say something, you say, is that your opinion? Because you know it's not a fact. And then you get a chance to give your opinion.
Yeah.
And they can't say anything because it's give and take, or it should be.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm going to take advantage of that remark to point out, when you go to talk to somebody about the faith, this is one of the reasons why it's important to know your Bible and to use the Bible, because if you say something and you don't substantiate it with the Bible, then they'll feel free to offer their opinion. But when you show them the Bible, you say, well, look, this is what the Bible says. It's no longer a matter of opinion. Yeah. Something else? Okay. Very good. Okay, let's go ahead on to question number 600. And let me see, what are 651, yeah. I want to see if there's anything else I had in there. Okay, 651. What did Jesus do when he heard that Lazarus was sick? And we're going to base that on verses 3 and 4. It says, therefore his sister sent unto him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. So the answer that we got is B. He waited 2 days before going to him, according to his own plan. According to his own plan, that God might be glorified. You want to throw in there John 11:11. These things said he, and after that he saith unto them, our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go that I may wake him out of sleep. Okay, so he waited 2 days before going to him according to his own plan. So if you look at A says he rushed to take care of him because Mary, Martha, and Lazarus were special to him. Well, it's important to point out that this answer is wrong only because that's not what Jesus did. Okay, it's not because it's a wrong thing to do, to rush in. Okay. Rushing to someone's side in a time of need is very often the right thing to do. It's very often the right thing to do. And in fact, we should be especially mindful of those who are very close to us. Okay, it says that he loved them. So you could say, well, why didn't he rush in? Because they were special to him. Well, that's actually a good thing to do also. Galatians 6, 9, and 10, that's Galatians 6, 9, and 10 says, let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. As we have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially unto them who are of the household of faith. Now, it could look like favoritism sometimes when maybe somebody gets, maybe better treatment or something like that. And that's the reason that they might be looking like it's favoritism is because it is favoritism and it's right to do. Okay? If somebody's working hard for the Lord, you want to keep them going. So yes, we by all means should help them out a little bit faster than we might help out the guy on the street. Let me comment on that in just a moment. Let's look at C. He healed him from where he was at. Well, healing Lazarus from afar is not something that was inappropriate to do either. Jesus had done this on various occasions. But there's something else that's going on here, which is Christ having a plan that he was working. So Jesus was operating according to his own plan for what he was about to do. It was not yet time for him to attend to Lazarus and his family. In ministering to others, it's important to point out that sometimes it is important to wait. So rushing into somebody's side sometimes is very important. If somebody has somebody who passed away, you'll want to be there quickly for that person. Personally, when I had, whether it was my mother passed away or my father passed away, a sister or a brother, my reaction is I like to go off to the side and be quiet and take a moment to be quiet and all. I don't want somebody rushing to my side. But other people, it is the very appropriate thing to do. Sometimes it's important, when we're ministering to others, it's important to point out that sometimes it's important to wait and give people or situations room to develop before they can be addressed. Sometimes somebody's going through a thing in their life, and you can go in with advice, but they're still so confused about what's going on that you can go in with the best advice, and there's no framework, there's no context for it to fit in. They need a little bit of time to sort out what just happened to them, what's going on, maybe to figure out that they don't have an answer. Okay, now I'm ready for you to come in and give me an answer. So they need to work on things before they can receive further advice. Sometimes the situation needs to develop before it warrants us getting involved. Now, Jesus' response was thoughtful and deliberate. If we move too quickly to fix everything, we can actually end up looking like we are controllers instead of trying to be there to be a blessing. Okay, even when we go to help, we need to then be inviting people instead of commanding them to use our recommendation instead of being forceful. Yet there are other times, especially when sin is involved, that we do need to be clear in our condemnations. The bottom line is that we need to be cautious in our approach with people, and Jesus was certainly doing this on this occasion because he had something he was about to work, and he had to let the situation develop before it was ripe for him to get involved. Any thoughts? Anybody would like to share any comments, any questions? Okay, Brother Tone, yes.
Jesus is purposive, and it is always the end result would always be the glorification of his Father.
Yes.
And so therefore, what would most glorify the Father except that he does something out of the natural?
Yes.
The number of days that lapses provides a chance for the corpse to decompose,
Yeah.
Pastor. Therefore, when he raised him up from the dead, that's literal, and he had to reconstitute the chemicals so that they will become fresh again.
Mm-hmm.
So it shows that there's no other choice but to conclude he is God.
Yeah, yeah. His plan pulls it off perfectly. Shock, right? Yeah. Okay, question 652. How did Jesus respond to his disciples' fear of going to Judea, where people wanted to stone him? This is based on verses 7 to 10. It says, Then after that saith he to his disciples, Let us go into Judea again. His disciples saying to him, Master, the Jews of late sought to stone thee, and goest thou thither again? Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If any man walk in the day, he stumbleth not, but because he seeth the light of this world. But if a man walk in the night, he stumbleth because there is no light in him. Now, I have to say this answer is a little bit harder to justify, but let's go at it anyhow. So you got the answer is? It is B. There was no harm that could come while walking in the light of God's will. Before we tackle that, let's look at A and C together. A is doing things with his understanding darkened was a risk worth taking. Okay, Jesus didn't know what he was doing, but he said, I'll risk it anyhow. Or Jesus didn't have any light to go by, so he took their advice and waited till it was safe to go. No, neither of those things happened. You see, Jesus' understanding was never darkened by sin, doubt, or lack of information. It's understandable, especially when we're darkened by lack of information, to be cautious and take less risks. But Jesus had a good assessment of the situation. Okay, so no harm can come as long as you're walking according to God's will. Well, okay, having no harm obviously does not mean that no harm could ever come. Okay. The key words here are while walking in God's will. Now, Jesus' crucifixion came in the darkness of man's sin, but while it was God's mission for Jesus to walk and work, he was going to make sure just to keep fulfilling that mission. This part of Jesus' work was during a window of opportunity where God shined the light on Israel. Even when Jesus went to the cross, however, he did not stumble in his mission. Okay, because he says, those that walk in the night stumbleth. Well, this was no stumble on Jesus' part. You say, yeah, but he got harm. Okay, well, he was not stumbling in his mission because he had the light of his Father's will to do that. One might argue that harm did come, but not really, because see, Jesus had victory over death. Whatever we're going through, we might say, oh, well, I thought that there was no harm going to come to me, so why did my leg get lopped off? Okay, why did I lose my sight? I thought no harm was supposed to come. Well, ultimately, we will also have that victory that Jesus had, and our mission will not ultimately be harmed. We get to go into glory. Okay, I think the statement that I would make out of this, because it's a little bit of a stretch to share it this way, is that while you're on the mission serving God, you're going to be able to carry whatever it is that God has you to do. And if you say, well, I got shot down in the middle of it, well, no, you fulfilled the part that God had for you to do. Okay? So as long as you were doing the part that you had to do, God was sustaining you for that. And don't be so certain that getting shot down is not part of that mission as well. That is part of it as well. For that matter, let me just remind us. I like to tell the story about my Satanist acquaintance in Bayonne who was trying to mock against Christianity. He talked about this Christian couple from Keswick who got shot, who went down with one of the planes on 9/11, and he said, "So where was God then?" I said, "Right where he was supposed to be." how do you know that those people were not planted by God on that plane because there were lost people that were going to need to hear the gospel? I'm going to guess that those people, as devout servants of God, the only way I'll know is when we get into glory to find out. But if I were on that plane, I hope that I would look at this and say, we're going down. I'd turn to the person and say, dude, you're about to die, so am I. Are you ready for Jesus Christ? Are you ready to meet him? Are you ready to be in heaven? Okay, so so don't be so sure that the harm itself is not also part of the mission, and you will be surviving the ultimate earthly harm, which is death on this earth. You're going to be surviving it in heaven. Okay, question 653. How did Jesus describe Lazarus' condition? Now, this is an easy one here, but the interesting stuff is in A and C. I'll tell you, well, A and B, or I'm sorry. Actually, all three of them have some interesting stuff here. Okay, John 11, verses 11 and 12 says, "These things said he, and after that he saith unto them, Our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go that I may awake him out of sleep. Then said his disciples, Lord, if he sleep, he shall do well." They think, oh, well, that's good. He's getting some rest. So the answer here is C. He said he was sleeping at first. Now let's look at A along with C. He said he was dead at first, or he said he was sleeping at first. Well, Jesus was in effect pointing out the true nature of death when he talked about him sleeping. Okay, the use of the word sleep was a figure of speech that refers to death. But we want to distinguish this, however, from any sense that the Christian Science cult applies to death. Okay, Christian Science, what do they teach? They use a kind of a double talk that says that death is an illusion. Death is an illusion. And at the same time, they recognize that people die. So, they sort of have to face the reality that the person's not walking around any longer and they're buried. Now, we want to also say, certainly we hold to the fact that our life continues on beyond the death of the body. Where the Christian Science cult especially gets into trouble is when they extend that sense of illusion to disease, and they treat it also as an illusion, and they rely solely on prayer for healing. And there have been some lawsuits over time where a kid was allowed to die because they didn't allow him to get treatment because they were just going to pray him through. And sometimes you might get that in some Pentecostal circles. That might happen as well. But the Seventh-day Adventist, the Christian Science people, they do it because they think it's just all an illusion anyhow. Yeah, it's of no consequence if somebody dies, but if you got somebody who's still alive and they're diseased, yeah, call the doctor in. Before I go any further, Brother Joe, yeah.
It's just interesting to note that Mary Eddy Baker and whatever other
Mary
last
Baker
name she
Eddy,
has, Mary Baker Eddy, she shared her illusory illnesses with doctors.
Oh. Okay.
So, I think to know that would be enough for me not to remain in that belief system. But, as she was proclaiming that illness is an illusion, yeah, she was visiting doctors on her own, so, which just goes to show that even she didn't believe what she was saying.
Yeah. When you look at B, he said that he ceased to exist. Now, why would that be an issue? Well, that's an issue because the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Seventh-day Adventists, now the Jehovah's Witnesses got this from the Seventh-day Adventists, they'll never admit that they're an extension from Seventh-day Adventists. They sort of were an outgrowth from Seventh-day Adventism. They teach that the soul goes to sleep. It's called soul sleep. And that in the resurrection, they are raised either to life or to complete annihilation in an eternal death, ceasing to exist. And so they've got a sort of mixture of sleeping and ceasing to exist that they apply to people once they die. And so this is important to know. Sometimes people will. We were just talking about that, weren't we? Seventh-day Adventists. A lot of people think of them as Bible teaching in many ways because they can sound very much like the teaching of the Bible. It's their peculiar doctrines that are the problem, and that's one of them there. Okay, question 654. How did Thomas Didymus demonstrate that the disciples did not understand this opportunity to grow in faith? Verse number 16 says, Then said Thomas, which is called Didymus, unto his fellow disciples, Let us also go, that we may die with him. So the answer is B. He suggested that life is hopeless. They might as well go and die with him. Okay, well, looking at A and C together first, he suggested they go and mourn with Mary and Martha, or he suggested they go and encourage Mary and Martha with the teaching of the resurrection. Those would be normal reactions on hearing of someone dying if you're a Christian. Okay, we should be taking comfort in each other and the consideration of the resurrection. So those would be two good things. Thomas's pessimism represents how people who are either without the Lord or people who have an insufficient spiritual maturity will treat death as hopeless. Okay, this was going to turn out to be an opportunity for them to see that there's more to death than dying. There's more to death than dying. Okay, question 655. What was the difference between Mary and Martha's reaction? And this is based on verses 19 to 29 and verse number 32. Many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him. But Mary sat still in the house. Then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. But I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee. Jesus saith unto her, Thy brother shall rise again. Martha saith unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this? She saith unto him, Yea, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world. When he had so said, she went her way and called Mary her sister secretly, and saying, The Master is come and calleth for thee. As soon as she heard that, she arose quickly and came unto him. Then verse number 32, Then when Mary was come where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying unto him, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. That's a mouthful. The answer that you got should have been what? It is A. Martha went out to meet Jesus to discuss with him what he would do. And that is the difference between their reactions. So when you look at C, Mary sought affirmation of her faith. No, it was Martha who discussed the resurrection with Christ, not Mary. For A, looking at A. Looking at B. Mary was more trusting in what Jesus would do. Well, we don't get an indication that Mary was more trusting. She also questioned Jesus about letting Lazarus die, so that's not the way that they were different. So the answer is Martha, by habit, was given over to action. And I suppose that's about a perfect thing to point out from this morning's message is if you're in the habit of doing and serving and things like that, you're going to come across more opportunities to really know Christ. Her proactivity led her to have a greater encounter with Christ. Now, we reflect on this, that Mary was the one who was, Martha was concerned about Mary not really serving, and Jesus pointed out, yeah, you're cumbered about with so much, but Mary's chosen the better part. It is, but this is one of the reasons why I think it's good to have pointed out that Jesus didn't condemn Martha for her work. And in fact, in this situation, we can see that Martha's get up and do something about stuff actually served her very well. Okay. Make a note here. We can also point out that what might be considered a weakness in some other places or something that's a little bit maybe seems off to us is actually a strength that can be used. Remember, God's strength is made perfect in our weakness. According to 1 Corinthians, that this is so that God gets the glory. Okay, it's kind of understandable if. Okay, I have to give only a half an example here. If Joe delivers a fantastic lesson, that would be understandable. Okay, you say, oh yeah, it's pretty good. Joe does study. Now, if we had somebody, this is why I can only use half an example. I can't name another person lest I make them feel bad. But if somebody else who is not of such a stature teaching got up and delivered a powerful lesson, that we would be impressed and we would say, wow, God really worked in that person because they sure do not have that wherewithal to be able to deliver that kind of lesson. And so God does get the glory. You look at the Apostle Peter, and what was something that Peter was known for during his time spent with Jesus Christ? So, Miss Nancy? Blurting out stuff. Very rash. Okay, but look who was there at Pentecost when it was time to preach. The same man who stepped up and put his foot in his mouth, okay, he stepped up and stood on his feet instead and delivered a powerful message. And he became a strong, outspoken person for Jesus Christ. So we might get a little bit nervous about the outspoken person, but also that person might have a bold witness later on. And you can see this in different ways too, with different characters there. Don't be worried about the weakness. Let's see. Yes, so be in the habit of stepping up, and you'll be able to stand out many times as well. Okay, question 656. What did Jesus promise for those who believed in him? Based on verses 23 to 26, Jesus saith unto her, Thy brother shall rise again. Martha saith unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. Whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this? And the answer is, see that those that believe in him will partake of his resurrection and life. Now, when you look at A and B, okay, that he would give those who believe in him life in the end times, that he would raise up those who believe in him at the end times. Okay, can you figure out what's the common element that makes those two answers wrong? It's the phrase, in the end times. Okay. The problem with is that we have to wait until the end times to receive either eternal life or the resurrection. There are some people that teach that. Now, this can lead to the misconception that before we receive life in the end, we can lose our salvation in the meantime. No, 1 John 5:12 says, He that hath the Son hath life. Not will have life. He that hath the Son hath life now. He that hath not the Son of God hath not life. Okay, now, make a note of Galatians 4, verses 5 to 7, and also Romans 8:23. When we look at C, that those who believe in him will partake of his resurrection and life, okay, well, we have the resurrection now. This sort of goes along with one of the comments we were making this morning in the Bible class. We have the resurrection now. Where? In our spirit. Galatians 4, 5 to 7 says, to redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons. Because you are sons, God hath sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Wherefore thou art no more a servant, but a son, and if a son, then an heir of God through Christ. Now, when we look at Romans 8:23, we see the definition of the adoption. So Galatians, Paul references the adoption that we have. Romans 8:23, the adoption is defined. Not only they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, to wit, the redemption of our body. What Paul is doing in these two places, remember, he wrote both books, and in one place, he's talking about how that we have the adoption spiritually now. In other words, our spirit is resurrected now. Our spirit is a new spirit. And that new spirit is one with Christ. That new spirit cannot sin, according to 1 John chapter 3. And so we have that new spirit, and sure, we're going to serve God. But we're waiting for the rest of the adoption. That's why in Galatians it says if we're a son, that is, if we're adopted and we have that adoption in our spirit, we have that resurrection in our spirit, then we are an heir of God through Christ. What are we an heir of? The new body that's to come. Okay, and Romans chapter 8, you can read that later on and compare notes in there. Romans chapter 8 describes the inheritance that we have, that what we are heirs of is the fullness of the resurrection. Okay, so the idea is that we have it now. You don't have to. We are waiting for the resurrection. We're looking forward to the rapture, right? Say amen, everybody. Okay. We're looking forward to the rapture. But we already are participating in the resurrection, in Jesus' resurrection. He was resurrected to the newness of life in his body. We have that in our spirit because we are one with him. We're one with him. I like to point out that phrase, being in Christ, is such a potent and powerful phrase in the Scriptures, because it's not that we have life in us and are made eternally alive. It's that we are one with Christ. He is eternally alive. We share in his life with that new spirit. It's not that we have our resurrection, it's his resurrection that we share in because we are in him. We are the elect of God now because Jesus is the elect one, and when we are in him, we are also the chosen of God once we get to be in him. Okay, so this is a really kind of an important point to keep in mind. It's not one of your first teachings that you're going to put out there, but it is something to help people understand. Yeah, you've got the resurrection already in you. You're waiting for phase 2. Phase 2. I point out that the last pastor before me had gotten up on a Sunday morning. I was told that he announced that it was impossible to do a work here effective that day. He was resigning. It happened to be Easter Sunday. Beyond me, how do you get up and, I don't know whether he said that before he preached about the power of the resurrection or after. Wouldn't matter. If he said it before, he ruined the whole sermon. If he said it afterwards, he just negated and denied the message of the whole sermon that has to be about the resurrection. Okay, and by the way, that's why I point out from time to time that the teaching of the resurrection is just as much a vital part of the gospel as the crucifixion. The resurrection is actually part of the definition of the gospel. You can check that out in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Okay, anything before I go on to... So the answer... Did I not say that before? The answer is C. Yeah, that those who believe on him will partake of his resurrection and life, not in the end times, but now, currently. Yeah. Oh, well, that is a little strange, right? Yeah, we are in the end times. I mean, we are so close that we can taste it. Okay, 657. I love this. Jesus knew he was going to raise Lazarus. How did he respond to Mary's sorrow? And it's John 11:35. And listen carefully, because if you don't, you're going to miss it. Jesus wept. Okay, there it is, so short and sweet. So what was his reaction to her sorrow? See, he wept. Okay, now look at A and B for a moment. He told her to cheer up because it's a sin to be sad. I've had people say that, and I'm like, oh man, you don't know what you're talking about. It's okay, go ahead, cry. Have a good cry. He told her to be strong. No, A and B are typical, quote-unquote, comfort that we receive from others in time of grief. For C, it's important to point out that Jesus wept even though he knew very well what he was about to do. Grief is something that we should feel as a matter of compassion. Okay, it is very appropriate to have sense of grief. It's not just all about joy. Things should grieve us in this world. It's not just a matter that this was made a verse by itself, when it came time to number the verses. In the numbering, they didn't say, oh, let's put this all by itself here. Okay, so draw emphasis. It's a very short sentence that stands by itself quite appropriately. In weeping, there are no words to do justice for our sorrow. In fact, words would ruin the importance of the emotion. Sometimes we need to just weep. You see somebody weeping, okay, don't get them to start talking technically about why they're crying. Now, I don't know if you pick up on it, but this actually flies in the face of how I talk about how you put facts before feelings. Okay, this is a time when it's appropriate to let feelings flow. When you just weep, you don't try to make sense of it, you just cry before the Lord. When you look at the Psalms, you have some times, certainly when David was rejoicing over things, you have times when he was in deep soul anguish also, and he let it flow in front of God, and it becomes immortalized in the Psalms that we have. Sometimes weeping is just the thing. There's times for words later on, but don't deny the importance of the emotion. See, I typically say facts before feelings. I don't say get rid of feelings. Okay. Just put them in the right order. Except if somebody dies, in which case, weep. Spend some time. Give us some tears. Okay. Anybody want to add anything on there? Brother Tone, yes.
This is a question, Pastor. Because I know if reading from the scripture, he really shared the sorrow of Mary that he wept. Was he not also weeping for Lazarus?
You know, it
Because the reason why I say that is he just killed the joy of Lazarus when he revived him.
Yeah, really. Yeah, should have let him go on to glory. It doesn't indicate, but I don't see how we could say otherwise. I think he could have been weeping for, I mean, there's plenty to weep for, not just for her sorrow. Sure, for Lazarus also. It could be, I would say, would apply to just anything there. It's just an open weeping there.
It's just like saying, sorry, buddy, I have to disturb your joy first because
Yeah,
I want you to be an illustration to these doubting people around me whom I have to demonstrate your power.
Or it could be that he was weeping for what he was about to do to Lazarus. Yeah, I'm sorry to disturb your rest here. Yeah. Okay. Okay, question 658. What did Jesus do when Martha told him about how long Lazarus had been in the grave? This is based on verses 39 to 40. Jesus said, "Take ye away the stone." Martha, the sister of him that was dead, saith unto him, "Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he has been dead 4 days." Jesus saith unto her, "Said I not unto thee that if thou wouldst believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God?" So the answer would be, okay, B, he reminded her what he had said about his power in life. Okay, for A and C together, he sought her counsel on what he should do. He's thinking, oh, well, what do you think I should do? Okay, he blessed the grave and comforted Martha and Mary. Oh, he's thinking, oh yeah, okay. Let me just bless the grave and then we'll go on and we'll have a repast or something. Well, when Martha pointed out that Lazarus was in the grave 4 days, Jesus had already discussed the resurrection with her. He didn't say, oh, okay, I see your point. Let's discuss this and see what we can come up with. Neither did he just give up and just try to comfort her and her sister. And this reminds me of a funeral I did for Joanne Polara's father. And I witnessed to him on his deathbed practically, and I let her be the one to bring him to prayer and for salvation. She did. And we got to the time for the funeral. Now Joanne's mother was attending down at Bergen Point Community Church, and so they had an interim pastor there. He was an interim pastor. And I did not know much about them. I just knew that they were not fundamentalists, so I wasn't sure how this was going to go. And so at the funeral, at the time of the funeral, I was going to be asked to speak, but he was going to be conducting the service because that was her mother's pastor. And so I just thought, well, that's just the way it goes sometimes. And so we got there, and I just figured, let him do his funeral thing, and then I would share a word afterwards. I wanted to have the last thing to be presented was the gospel. But the pastor came in, and he announced to me that he was going to be following the Presbyterian Order of Service, which I'm not even sure what that is, but he wanted me, since I had had so much contact and had ministered more to the father than he'd ever had a chance to, he wanted me to go first. I said, no, that's okay. You go ahead and go first. Whatever that order of service, you go ahead, I'll go second. I'm humble. I'm a modest person. He said, no, I insist you go first. I thought, no, I want you to go first. I think I argued just a little bit more, but no, he wanted me to go first. And so I did, and I explained and talked about about how he prayed to get saved on his deathbed and all. And I went through the gospel, the way I'm going to do at a funeral time like that. And then he got up to do his part. I thought, well, whatever. Well, he stood up and he says, there's nothing I can add to what this brother has said. He said, he explained it very powerfully. And then he proceeded to give an invitation for salvation. And I was shocked. But I was grateful. I was blessed. So then we got done our part, and we stepped aside so the funeral director can take over. And he said to me on the side, he says, I'm so glad you did that. He says, when he was in seminary training, there was a debate whether at a funeral you are there to just comfort the family, or should you bring up the gospel. That bring up the gospel might stir up some emotions. And he was of the opinion, you deliver the gospel and you stir up the emotions. And I was just so blessed by that. And I thought, wow, you hear these stories, but now I had a testimony from somebody that in seminary, the kind of seminary that I went to, unfortunately, that this was a debate. Now, I happen to know that there are others that are kind of like that. I remember when I went to do my mother's funeral, now the pastor of the church is a good fundamentalist Baptist pastor and everything, but he knew I was a pastor, and so we were going to do the service, and I had said to him, now listen, I said, I know how these things go. What's a convenient time for you to have the service? He said, well, thank you very much. Nobody ever considers that, really. I said, yeah, no, I know how this goes. So he said Friday night, Saturday, and of course, I'm an unknown quantity to him, so I wanted to go ahead and preach, and he was very grateful because we brought the gospel full force into the time of the funeral. And he says, well, I didn't know what you were going to do, but I'm so glad you did a good job. And this is the way it should be at a funeral, is to remind us about the power and the life, not just to try to be there to comfort only. Okay, but when you look at B, he reminded her that what he had said about the power and the life. Jesus reminded her, sometimes we need to take stock of all that lays before us in glory too when we start to lose sight of the goal. Okay, now question 659 is just a little bit fun. It's our last question here. Okay, what did Jesus do to Lazarus? Based on verse 22, but I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee. Let me see if I got the right verse for that. No, verse 23. Jesus saith unto her, thy brother shall rise again. It's supposed to be verse 23. This little typo will cause my computer to kick out the wrong verse. Okay, so the answer is? It is A. It is A. He restored his life. And this is a little bit of a question. B looks like it would be the obvious answer because Lazarus was, after all, raised from the dead. And Jesus also had just talked about himself being the resurrection. However, technically, Jesus only said that he would rise again. Okay. When Jesus comforted John the Baptist, he talked about the dead being raised, that they were having these resurrections. No, they weren't being resurrections. They were raisings. They were being raised from the dead, not resurrected. Okay, the word raised is the idea of It comes from a word meaning that we get the word energized from, meaning brought back to life. The word for resurrection is Anastasio. Well, that makes a lot of sense, right? Okay. Stasio is where we get the word stand from. So and ana is the prefix again. To stand again, that's the word for resurrection. What Jesus said he was going to do was that he was going to rise, not be resurrected. Okay, so the resurrection is something that's going to be reserved for the rapture. That's the resurrection. So what he did was he restored his life. He re-energized him. Now, we don't want to say resuscitate. There's a difference there. Before I go on, I see some hands. Go ahead, Miss Nancy.
Yeah, so if he had resurrected Lazarus, would that have meant that Lazarus would have been in his glorified body and wouldn't have died again?
I'm going to say yes on technical points, okay? Because what's the title of this section here? Okay? It is the raising of Lazarus, yet we often call this the resurrection of Lazarus. Okay? But it's technically the raising of Lazarus.
Yeah, because he did die again.
Yeah. So if somebody says Lazarus resurrected, I wouldn't take off my shoe and throw it at him. Okay. Whatever, we use the terms kind of interchangeably, but on technical points, it's a raising, a re-energizing, not a resurrection. Yes.
So, to resurrect Lazarus would have defeated the purpose of Jesus' other title is first among the resurrected, Pastor? Is that how
Yes.
Paul put it?
Yes.
So
The first
he,
among
he
the-
cannot he cannot precede before his Lord.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the time for him to have his body glorified would be during the rapture, Pastor. They will go ahead of those that would be then living.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, offhand, I couldn't think of any scriptures to look up this way, but if ever something is said about him being resurrected, I'm not. That's why I say on technical points. Okay, we definitely know it was not resurrection as in the rapture. At least that very much we know that, like you said. Was raised again is far more appropriate. But like I say, if somebody else mixes the terms together, we don't die over it. Okay. However, we do want to be careful of C. He resuscitated him. Definitely he did not do that. Now that's different. If I drop over right now, please resuscitate me. Or not, whichever. If Nancy's still alive, resuscitate me. Okay, if she's gone, don't resuscitate me. Okay. Jesus did not resuscitate Lazarus as if he was about to be dead. Okay. He made sure that the people would be able to see that he had power over death. This was a testimony. In other words, he waited for him to be 4 days in the grave, so that he was dead by all standards. Okay. But this was a testimony about what was about to happen in his own death. So it's a testimony. It's not one-to-one comparison. It's like the one is foreshadowing the other. He did not swoon. Okay, there's a thing called swoon theory. Okay, we don't talk about swooning anymore. Okay? When I asked Nancy to marry me, she didn't swoon. Oh, no, she was very thoughtful. Okay, but they actually had things. I think they were called swooning couches, because it was in another age. It was a thing to do if you were a female. Oh, so they built couches special for it. But it's not swooning as the Muslims would like to teach. This is what Muslims will teach about this. And they do this not with any data or with any interpretations of anything. They just throw it out there like, well, that must be what happened. And then he was resuscitated in the coolness of the tomb. Jesus truly did have power over death in his resurrection. And so you don't want to ever say resuscitate. Nobody ever does, except liberals theological liberals and Muslims. Yeah, they have that in common. Okay, somebody have a thought in there, a comment to add on? Yes.
There's something about being dead for at least 3 days. Is that when the soul departs? The Jewish.
According to cultural tradition, I did not look that one up specifically, but I understand that was one of the things that people believed, that after 3 days, the soul was gone and they were good and dead
Then
for
he was,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
I wondered if that was why Jesus waited.
It would certainly be consistent with it, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that would match because he definitely was doing this for God's glory. He was distinctly waiting.
Yes.
Okay, so not so that he would arrive at the moment of death.
Pastor?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question along those lines too. I was just curious, since we know that when a person dies, they either go to heaven or hell. There's no place called purgatory or limbo.
Right.
I'm just curious, where was those days that Lazarus was dead? Where exactly was his soul? Where did his soul get recalled from?
We don't know. You could make some educated guesses. You might say that he went to the bosom of Abraham. I don't know if I would say that. I would not. If somebody wanted to suggest that, I don't know that I could totally rule that out. He could have just been hanging out in that body. We actually just don't know, but certainly like the bosom of Abraham or paradise is a good candidate for where he might have been.
Yeah, I was just thinking, would he be allowed to come back to life with the knowledge of heaven if he was recalled from heaven?
So, well, he would definitely not have been in heaven, okay, because they were kept in captivity in the bosom of Abraham in paradise before the resurrection took place. There's no reason to think that he wouldn't say it. In fact, we do know that his resurrection, his raising was a burden to the Pharisees later on. It does not say that he testified. There's nothing that militates against that. It would certainly be interesting. He could write a book, 60 Minutes in Heaven, I suppose. That was some... Well, no, I'm referring to how in modern times, there's this book out there now, 60 Minutes, or something like that, and which turns out to be a hoax anyhow. Brother Tone, yeah.
Yeah, can we use Paul's experience?
You can use Paul's experience, yeah.
In the experience of Paul, he went to heaven, he was called to heaven, but he was not allowed to talk about what is he like in heaven.
Yeah, there were things that he witnessed that he couldn't repeat, although it doesn't preclude the possibility he could have talked about other things, just some things that he couldn't repeat. John
In Revelation.
the apostle in the Revelation, he certainly went and there he got an eyeful that he was supposed to report about, but of course he didn't pass. But then Paul didn't necessarily pass either. It's just that he was either in the body or out of the body. He didn't know, and he doesn't even claim to be the one anyhow. We sort of strongly assume that.
He just describes it as glorious, and that's it.
Yeah. So he could have. It would be interesting. It would be interesting to have been in that time. Then this goes to the issue of when people say, "Well, nobody ever came back from the dead to tell us what it was like." Well, yeah. Well, I've talked about that recently. That's a dumb thing to say, anyhow. Miss Kathy, yeah.
According to six, when it says that Jesus wept,
Yeah.
I always have this discussion about this. If he wept, do we think he ever laughed?
The answer is yes. I'm trying to think of how to justify it.
In Psalms it says God laughs.
It does,
I mean, I don't know that.
but I think he laughs in derision at the people who who mock. Yeah, Nancy, go ahead.
I think right after it said Jesus wept, those around said, "Behold how he loved him." So my guess would be that it looked like he was really grieving at the thought of losing Lazarus.
No, I mean, I think her question is, other times might he have ever laughed? I'm gonna say yes. You know, sometimes you have these depictions of Christ out in paintings and everything, and there's one called the Laughing Jesus. You know, that's a motif for that, and I'm kind of partial to that one myself. I'm kind of partial to that idea. We know that he partied. Okay, he was there at the Feast of Cana, which was a joyful experience. I can't see him going in all dour, you know, like, stop having fun, everybody. And yeah, what kind of jokes would Jesus tell?
Peter and.
Yeah, well, he certainly had a lot of material to joke about. Somebody else I saw.
Well, the Bible speaks that he shared all of our infirmities and everything, so
Yeah.
if God created everything, it would be something that God would have created. Of course, we've corrupted it, but
Yeah, he shared in everything, without sin. Yeah, so he would have shared. I'm saying this for the microphone's sake. Yeah.
Yeah, he also sang with the rest of the disciples.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he did everything human, just like everybody else, except that there's no specific scripture that says that he cracked jokes like the way
Yeah.
people now crack jokes.
You sort of tend to record those things that are significant to the issue at hand.
But in the Psalms, it's recorded that God laughs at the foolishness of the fools.
Yeah. So there's laughter for some reason. Okay. Well, very good. Let's go ahead and, go ahead, Brother Tone.
What about the daughter of Jairus? Was that the same case like Lazarus? I think the daughter died, and then there's the son of the widow being brought to the.
Yes, those are definitely similar cases. The only thing, because it talks about in that other passage in Matthew about him referring to people being raised from the dead. So yeah, it would be the same. Here's what was different about this situation. The key characteristic was 4 days later. That's what's key in
That's
this.
the
and that's what makes it.
decomposition, decomposed already probably.
Yeah, because if before that, somebody could say, oh yeah, well, they weren't really dead. No, 4 days later, you're pretty sure they're gone. Yeah, behold, he stinketh.